I love to help people. As I said, I'm a people person. So if at the end of my days, people remember me as somebody who helped them, whether it's personally or in their career, I think I've done my job. Hi, I'm Chris Reynolds, and I'm on a mission to help independent financial advisors build a better business through a remarkable client experience. In this podcast, you're going to learn how to do that from my conversations with the visionaries, the leaders, the independent advisors who are reshaping the future of the financial advice industry. At the end of each episode, you're going to walk away with an actionable idea that you can take and use right now, and it will help you to build a better business today. This is Turning the Page.
Welcome to Turning the Page. No, this is not Chris Reynolds. My name is, don't worry, Chris is here, but my name is Matt. I'm one of the team members that makes the podcast behind the scenes. You know, every other week on our podcast, Chris interviews the game changers in this industry. He's always talking to the experts. He's talking to fascinating people and trying to extract as much knowledge as he can out of them and then sharing it with you. But who is Chris? Who is the guy that is asking these questions? Who is this guy that is taking all this knowledge and sharing it with you? And he's been around for many, many years, and he has knowledge of his own he wants to share. And today, we're turning the table, and I'm interviewing Chris, so you can kind of get a little bit of an insight into the man that you hear on this podcast. So who is Chris Reynolds? Well, for over 25 years, he's been a veteran in the financial industry. Chris began his career as a financial advisor before becoming a branch manager and ultimately became the co-founder and president of Investment Planning Counsel, IPC. Over the years, Chris has found creative ways to lend his advice to thousands of Canadian investors. He's hosted several radio talk shows, including the National Investment Planning Show, which has aired all across Canada. He's contributed to 2 books on financial planning, My Kids Are Going to Be Rich, and Wealth Creation, a Canadian Guide to Financial Independence. He's been featured in the Globe and Mail, Advisor's Edge, Investment Executive, and many other industry publications. He's also a well-known financial speaker and spoken at numerous different conferences throughout Canada. And recently, there was a little bit of exciting news in Chris's world. Canada Life is acquiring IPC. So he's been a little bit busy. So I'm really glad and appreciative that he could take a little bit of time to chat with us today. Chris, welcome to your own podcast.
Thank you, Matt. And it is a pleasure to be on my own podcast. I love this concept, by the way. It came up, both Matt and E came up with this concept. I thought it was great. And once again, who likes talking more about themselves than me?
There we go. So you feel very comfortable on the other side of the microphone, which is really, really great. You've had experience on both sides as it is anyway, so this isn't completely new to you. So,
well, as you mentioned, I did have a radio show. Talk 640 was my anchor show, anchor station in Toronto, and we had at one time 10 radio stations across Canada. So, and I loved it. I loved radio, and podcast is really just an extension of radio. It's really the same format. It just reaches people in a different medium.
Absolutely. So let's dig into this, Chris. I'm going to start our interview today the way that you start your interviews when you're speaking to the people that come on here on your podcast. Tell me your story. How did you get here right now today?
This story I've told many times. So I actually, believe it or not, grew up on a farm. My dad trained racehorses. And so I grew up on a farm just north of Toronto in a place called King City. And we ran thoroughbred racehorses. You know, we'd run like 80 a season type of thing. But growing up, what I learned about horses is they're a lot of work. You got to wake up early in the morning. You got to muck their stalls. You got to look after them. And at some point, probably in my teens, mid to late teens, there used to be this guy that hung around the farm all the time. And this guy never seemed to work. He had a phone before anyone had a phone, you know, the big Zach Morris phones that people had. He drove a Mercedes, lived in this big house. And I was like, I wonder what this guy does. Like, I know what I have to do every day. I wonder what he does. And one day I asked him, what do you do for a living? And he said, financial advisor. And I remember thinking to myself way back then, I don't know what that is, but that's what I'm going to be. And from that moment, literally, I started reading about, you know, finances. What is financial advice? What does it mean? All through my early teens. And then I actually, when I got out of school, came down to Florida, came down to Miami, lived here for a little bit. But then I thought, you know what? I better go get a real job at some point. And so I came back to Canada. I saw a little ad in the newspaper for financial planning assistant. And I was like, wait a minute, that guy who was so successful, he was a financial advisor. I'm going to go be a financial advisor. So I applied for this ad, and I am getting hired at an insurance company. Actually, it was actually Empire Life, for those who know it. And started with nothing. Started making phone calls. I remember they handed me the book of leads, and if you don't know, everyone in the industry knows what the book of leads is, which is called a phone book. And they're like, these are all your leads. Start calling them. Somebody needs some insurance. Mm-hmm. And you know what? They were right. I started calling them, and some people did need insurance. And in fact, as I started into it, just the fact that I got to talk to people and, help them in that particular case, plan out their estates. And then they had, some investments. So I started to, recommend investments to clients. And then from there, at some point, I remember saying to myself, you know what? Mutual funds are the future. We got to look more towards investments. So I already had the insurance and estate planning background, started on the investment side, started to build up my business. And I can tell you, Matt, I loved it. Right. Mm-hmm. When you just find the thing that you're just happy to get up every day and do. Mm-hmm. And it was a great business. I got to get up, I got to deal with different people, got to give them advice. I got to see their savings grow. I got to see them be able to put their kids through school. As I said, loved it. And I probably would have still been an advisor, but at some point, I'm going to say I got in a dispute, I'm going to call it, with the company that I was with. It wasn't Empire's, which I've already named. So it's an unnamed company that I got in a dispute with, which I worked for. Basically, the conclusion after all of the discussions I had was, I'm like, how hard is it to run one of these companies? These guys do it, so I should be able to do it. And literally a couple months later, I started Investment Planning Counsel. And from there, as I said, when you're passionate about something, we just started building it up, and other people started to join us, and built it up to where it is. Actually, I was going to say where it is today at 30 billion, but once we do the deal with Canada Life, which should close later this year, as a combined entity, we'll be near $85 billion of assets under administration, and about almost 2,000 advisors from coast to coast. So, it's been a fun ride. There's lots of details in between, but that's how I got here.
That's amazing. I also find it intriguing that you were first introduced to this industry by a gentleman, and you first looked at them and it's like, that guy doesn't really work that much. That's it. And now then you went in the complete opposite direction and worked just really hard to build just this business that you've created over the years. Like you went in it's very different how that worked out that way.
Well, don't get me wrong, Matt. I don't want anyone having the impression that I work hard. I love what I do, and you know what I do mostly? Talk. Mostly what I do is talk. My little niece, she was asking me, what do you do all day? And I'm like, basically I wake up, I put a black t-shirt on, and I yell into a computer most of the day. So
there you go.
It's a pretty good way to make a living.
Welcome to 2023, everybody. So when after you had that dispute and you decided, I'm going to go and build this, what made you form IPC? What made you scratch that entrepreneurial itch and go, I want to build something of my own? Was it that dispute, or was there something else underneath that was pushing you to want to build something bigger than you?
I think there's a little bit of both. Certainly I built it out of spite. So there was, that stubborn aspect of my personality, that I will do things out of spite just to see if I can do them. So I'm not going to diminish that motivator. But at the other end, I've always, wanted to be a business person. Right? If anyone was to ask me as a kid, what do you want to be? I want to run a business. And in fact, I've only had one job in my whole life because I had to find my SIN number when I was a kid, because that was the only time I've actually had to give my SIN number, because I actually had a regular paying job. Even when I was insurance, it was all commission. So it was like being self-employed, as we started the company. And I think the reason of entrepreneurship is just that, the thing that I prize most is freedom. It is my ultimate goal. A lot of people say it's money, and people who meet me may or may not say that, but I can tell you my primary motivator in life is freedom. It is freedom from, other people making decisions for me, freedom to when I want to work, how I want to work, what I want to do. And being an entrepreneur is that ultimate freedom is if I don't want to do something, I can hire someone else to do that for me. If I'm good at something, I can focus that. If I think this is a better way to do something, I can do that. And so, that's just, I guess, inherent part of my personality. And this business just allows you to do that. You're doing something, that's giving back to the community. We're helping people. And so we're creating value for other people. But at the same time, we can decide how we create that value for them, and the way that we grow, the people we hire, the teams that we build, the motivation we have, the culture that the client has. That's all our design as an entrepreneur. And that's what really gets me excited, as
I
you can
love
probably
that.
tell.
Oh, I can tell. Like you're so passionate about this. This totally makes sense. You said that there was so many little in between moments that happened in this journey. What has been your favorite part of this journey over the years?
The favorite part by far is the team and the people. Like, one of the things that we really do pride ourselves as an organization is our culture. We have a great group of people. We have some of the best financial advisors, I wouldn't say not only in Canada, but probably in the world. We have a great team of motivated people, so everything, aside of our, accomplishments, and we've acquired companies, and, we've had different partners over those time period. But the thing that I think, has been the great people that I get to work with. And that sounds like almost a cliche, but anyone who knows me knows I'm a people person. And I love people, and I love seeing people be their best at something. And once again, I get to deal with a whole group of entrepreneurs, currently 650 entrepreneurs across Canada that work with IPC, running their own financial planning shop. And to see them succeed, I don't think there's anything more rewarding than that anyone can say, right? That they're doing better for their clients, they're doing better for their families, they're doing better for themselves. There's a lot of pride that we take, in those accomplishments, because people have done better because the organization exists.
I love that. And you're very passionate about it. I can tell. And especially like what you mentioned about how it's more than just you, and not even just the investors and the individuals that you work with, but how it really fans out to their clients and their lives. And you're able to connect and help in so many ways that you may never be able to realize, all the thousands of people that, you and other members of the IPC team that have helped. As you've gone along this journey too, has there been a least favorite part, or a part that that also might have surprised you, that maybe you didn't expect along the way? Something about the entrepreneurial journey that maybe surprised you?
It surprised me because it happened so often. As I said, if I had to say what was some of the downside, it's the same thing as the upside. I love people, but people will also let you down. And if you're not ready to have people let you down on a fairly regular basis, then being an entrepreneur is not for you. As much as you'd think that is, and there's people throughout my career that I've broken my back to help and support, and in turn, that hasn't worked out as well. They go on to other things. And so the things I take most pride in is the people, but the things also that have been disappointing sometimes in my career. And in fact, the only things that I can say that have been disappointing in my career are when people let you down when you least expect it. And so I think, as I said, but that's just part of the journey. And anyone who doesn't want to be an entrepreneur, doesn't think that they could handle being let down, shouldn't be an entrepreneur, because it's going to happen.
Well, and you kind of talked a little bit about this in a previous episode we did a couple of weeks ago. You did an episode talking about rock music lyrics and how so many of the lyrics are inspirational to you. But one thing you mentioned is that if you weren't doing this, you are a big music guy. You love music, and you would want to be someone like Rick Rubin, who's one of the most prolific music producers of our generation of all time, period, who takes talent and advises and grows them. And you kind of do that right now within the business. Talk a little bit about that. And what do you see in advisors today as you are advising so many people around Canada?
Well, and I think that it is a good analogy. And I thought about that is that Rick Rubin analogy, which is cultivating talent. Like, the founding principle of IPC, and what I'm always been about, is helping advisors build a better business. Now it is expanded to helping advisors build a better business through a remarkable client experience. But that's what we're all about, because I've always believed that if you can create value for somebody else, they'll create value for you. And so, to your point, we have 650 basically entrepreneurial advisors across Canada, soon to be, probably 1,500 across Canada, who there's some very key principles in creating a business and creating value. And the first principle is start with your client. Who is your client, or who do you want your client to be? What are their biggest problems and how can you solve them? So if I'm talking to one of my advisors, like, who are your clients today? Who should they be in the future? What are their unique problems and how do you solve them? And then how do you solve them? By creating a remarkable experience around that problem solving. If you can do those things, you got yourself a business, and you got yourself a thriving business, because what you're doing is remarkable. And I use that word because they will remark about it to other people. And that's how you will continue to grow, by getting referral after referral, because you're doing something special. You're doing something unique, and you're solving a problem in a niche market that no one else can do as good as you. And when we've used that formula over and over and over, we've seen success after success after success.
And that's also something that I know that this podcast is not just for financial advisors, but entrepreneurs, people that are building something as it is anyway. And you could probably use that advice in pretty much any industry, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. And that, as I said, is not necessarily unique to financial advisors. It's every business. But to do that, you have to, as I said, you have to sort of sit back as an entrepreneur and say, I can't create value for everyone. So who can I create the most amount of value? And it's usually whoever has the problem that you can solve better than anyone else. And if you can do that in a remarkable way, and again, regardless of the business, in a way that they will remember, in a way that is special, that's how businesses grow. And then you have to scale it, because now you hire other people who buy into you solving that problem for whomever it is. And that's how you scale. You can't scale based on your own skill set. You have to scale based on your team skill set and continue to build that scheme set. But you always stick with your general philosophy. So we've never lost the helping advisors build a better business. But every entrepreneur that I know is successful has stuck with what their mission was. They just have more people helping them make that mission come true.
You've been in this industry for a few years, I think it's safe to say.
Let's not put any numbers around that.
No, but it's
I started when I was 10.
Yes, very, very, very early on. He saw the guy with the cell phone, and the guy gave him the phone, and he just instantly started. Technology in that time has evolved, obviously. And that's such a big discussion, not only in the financial planning industry, but in every industry, how technology is changing everything. How has technology changed since you started, and how do you see technology affecting this industry in the future?
Well, first, when I started, I remember somebody, now I'm going to date myself. I remember someone coming and trying to get me to have a website. And I was like, website? I'm like, I want to reach people who I care about. Why would I need a website? Now, can you imagine a business without a website? So that's how far back, when I started, a CRM was a piece of paper, and I'd write notes on it, and I'd try to figure out where the notes were when I'd call that client back. Now, again, much, much more sophisticated, much more scope. And technology, the challenge with our industry and many other industries is we make them incredibly complex, and we need technology to harness in that complexity to make them simple. So another way is, and this is going to be roundabout answering your question, is first start with a simple business and then utilize technology to create great experiences for your clients. Right? That's what I say. So how do you make technology more scalable? How do you make better presentations? How do you make better contact? How do you utilize it for communication? But I think the thing that is going to change our industry more than anything, and is what we're doing right now, is online interaction, whether it's Teams, whether it's Zoom, whether it's any of those types of things. Because before, as a financial advisor, your client base was restricted to a particular geographic zone. It was probably 1 hour drive is your maximum zone from your office. Either you're going to go see them or they're going to see you. What technology now allows us to do is really service clients all over, right? and do it well. So the next phase of technology is we already have a great physical client experience, meaning coming into the office and how you take their information and how do you put financial plans. The next phase is going to how do you use this digital wonderland that we have out there to create those experiences in a digital manner, but still have the personality and the caring and the understanding of an individual. And the combination of those two things is what's going to change this industry quite dramatically.
That's amazing. Do you think that with these tools, it's easier to be able to connect? Do you think it was easier to be able to connect with clients just trying to build a rapport back then than it is today, even though it's easier to be able to have this type of conversation? Do you think that element has changed a little bit?
Well, it's changed in that you can now communicate with a large number of people quite easily, which you couldn't do before. Like we'd send out paper newsletters and that sort of thing. I can now theoretically communicate with 1,000 people simultaneously with the same message. So that type of communication we can systemize. But what technology will never give up is that one-to-one. Is I know you, I know your spouse, I know your dog, I know your kids, I know when you went on vacation, I know when you come back, I know what your goals are, I know what your objectives are. An algorithm will never replace that. So that's where that human touch can never be replaced by technology. But what technology can do is increase those touch points tenfold without a great expense to the entrepreneur or the advisor or anything else. You can now have, as I said, multiple touch points for the same cost point, whereas before it was very expensive to get that kind of scalability.
I can see that. If you were to start out as an advisor again today, what would you do differently?
That's a good question, and one that I think about quite often. I think that I would more pursue sort of what I call the investment counselor type of approach. Like before, what we used to do in the good old days is investment companies, fund companies would come to us and tell us why they had such a wonderful product. We would take that, and then we would go out and find customers for these products. I think that's all backwards personally now. And if I look at it from an objective point of view, what I would do as an advisor, I'd say, who are my key demographics? So I'd have clients who want income from their investments. I'd want clients who want accumulation. I'd have clients who want a more balanced approach. And then that's how I would do my segmentation, is based, what does that client want from me, as opposed to what does that client want to give me, or what do I want to give that client? Sorry. Make it more succinct. And then I would create, as I said, a great experience around each one of these demographics, that I would be the best at income, the best at accumulation, the best at balanced. And I would focus 100% on making my clients happy. So it would be just really turning it around. Instead of starting from the manufacturer to the client, now you start from the client and you become the manufacturer. So that's the difference. I'd be I was pretty client centric before. I'd be even more client centric today.
I like that. And probably with technology, it's probably easier than to be able to really have those different segments and those buckets that way, because you can really find those people and be able to talk to them and really be able to connect with them in a different way that you probably couldn't have, years ago.
Absolutely. And to your point, you connect with them on what they're most interested in. Like, why would you talk to somebody who's drawing money out of their investments about accumulating money and investing? They don't have an interest in that. On the opposite side, if somebody's in big accumulation, they don't really care how income. So you talk to your segments very differently, to your point, but also very personalized. And I think that's what technology allows you to do, is be very personalized with your message on what that client wants from you, as opposed to what you want to give that client.
So you've been a little busy lately because IPC was just announced, has done a deal with Canada Life. What has your life been like? What has that been like over the last couple of weeks?
Well, this has been going on for some time. So it wasn't, although the announcement just came, this business, and all businesses, by the way, not just this business, it's always about scale. It's all about getting to the next stage. And this also goes back to, some of the episodes we talk about of setting goals and prioritizing goals. Way back when, probably 20 years ago, I wrote down in my little journal, my goal journal, that at some point I was going to run a $100 billion company in Canada, the largest wealth management company in Canada. And whether you realize or not, once you write down a goal, you're always looking for all the ways, as they say, the universe tries to give you all these things that will make that goal come true. And in this particular case, you have already a company that was semi-related to us within the power group of companies. They already had, wealth management and pretty good. They're already great on the insurance side and the estate planning. Us coming together with our wealth and we're both very, very focused on the independent financial advisor in the Canadian marketplace. It just made sense. And now, sort of that goal or that dream, as I said, is coming true. And, I believe we're well on our way. If we're not number one, we're pretty close to being the top wealth management platform in the Canadian marketplace right now.
Well, that's amazing that you really were able to create something from just writing that in your journal years ago. You've talked about that in previous episodes about goal planning and making sure to have it written down and be very specific. And you are living example of that. So congratulations on everything. That is absolutely fantastic. So we have come down to the end of our podcast. And first off, I want to thank you so much for taking time to chat with us today. And just like you, I'm not going to let it go by the wayside. We have 3 rapid questions that we're going to end with. You like to end the episodes with 3 rapid questions that we do not send to our guests in advance. I have 3 questions that I've written that you have not seen yet. So we're going to wrap up with these 3 questions. We're going to see what it's like on the other side. Question number 1. One thing I know is that we talked before in this podcast, in his previous episodes, you've talked about your love of music and you have a large guitar set. You don't have any musical talent, but you love music in general. So I want to know, Chris, what song, when you hear it, any song, brings you back to a certain memory or reminds you of somebody? Is there one song that just, when the moment you hear it, you're like, yes, I remember this moment in time, or it just reminds me of this person for whatever reason?
Actually, that is a great question. Wow. Let me give it some thought. And the one that immediately pops into my head, and whether it's the most accurate or not, is Time by Pink Floyd. We were talking about this when I went through the lyrics of things. Time, that song reminds me, when I was starting my career, and if you don't know it, it talks about the importance of time and time's always slipping away. And whenever I hear that song, I think about the sense of urgency that I had back then. And every time I hear it, I think of that sense of urgency now is it's a lesson that I've talked about on this podcast, one that I've taken with my own strategic coach, is time is finite. And that song always clicks. Yeah. Even the first 3 bars, the ding, 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 as soon as I hear that, that's the first thing that pops into my mind.
Oh, great. It was such a great timeless reminder as well to always have in the back of our heads. Question number 2. One other thing I know that you love is wine. You talk about wine and share what wines you're having on Instagram. That's about 50% of your Instagram content is wine, let's be honest. Yeah. So I want to know, Chris, what is the most memorable glass of wine you have ever had? It can be either memorable from a taste or just like this was the most amazing wine, or is there a glass of wine that just it wasn't necessarily maybe the best, but is the experience, the memory, something connected to it that will always take you back to a moment in time?
I do remember once. There's a couple that come to mind, but I'm going to give you the one that's probably memorable for both the wine and the event. Is I was in Florence, Italy, at a converted monastery called Saint Michel. You can certainly look it up, which is on the mountains overlooking the valley, which is Florence. And they brought what year was it? A 2004 Brunello, which is virtually impossible to find if anyone knows wines. And while we were drinking it, myself and my wife were drinking it, there was a lightning storm that was happening over Florence, but not raining where we were. So here we were having one of the best wines that you can get in a beautiful setting of the monastery over Florence, watching a lightning storm dance across the city of Florence. I think all 3 of those things are very memorable.
Oh, I love that. That's definitely one of those moments you can always think back to. Have you had a glass of that wine since, or has that always just been?
I think that's almost an impossible wine to find. I would love to, by the way. So if anyone has a 2004 Brunello, give me a call.
Find the link in the show notes. You can send us a message. We'll make that happen. Final question, Chris. I'm actually going to ask you one of your favorite questions. How do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered, and I think about this quite a lot, as you can imagine, since I ask everyone this one, is somebody who helped people be their best. And if people can say, yep, he helped me, I spent a lot of time mentoring. I spend time, as you may or may not know, in Honduras, working with kids and helping them villages build infrastructure. I've been part of Junior Achievement in their mentoring program. I've sort of carved that niche out as I love to help people. As I said, I'm a people person. So if at the end of my days, people remember me as somebody who helped them, whether it's personally or in their career, I think I've done my job.
I love that. Thank you so much for taking time to chat today. And I hope for you listening that this gives you some more insight into who Chris is, why he's doing this, why he's sharing this knowledge. And one thing that I know he does also love to do is to have a virtual coffee with people. So why don't you tell people about what that's like and how they can get signed up if they want to chat with you? And why do you do it too?
Yeah, absolutely. This is just an extension of what I said. Coming out of this show, and the reason I do this podcast is to help people and mentor people on a much wider scale. As an example of using that technology to help people, but even on an individual basis. I've had lots of virtual coffees with people who've listened to the show and want a little bit of advice or want to talk about where their situation is and how to get it better. I'm always happy to volunteer my time to do that.
Love that. We'll be back to regular programming in the next episode. Don't worry, Chris will be back and we'll be speaking to someone amazing and getting some insight. But Chris, thank you for sharing your insight and your knowledge today. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. It was actually a lot of fun being on the other side.
I love this. We'll have to do it again sometime. We'll talk about like guitars or wine or something else at that point.
Exactly.
We'll do a whole
Something interesting.
Thanks, Chris.
Cheers. Thanks for joining me on Turning the Page. What did you learn from today's episode? If you follow me on LinkedIn, please drop me a comment there. I'd love to chat with you about it over virtual coffee. Send me a message on LinkedIn, or you can do so at our website. The link's in the show notes. I'm Chris Reynolds, and until next time.